Episode 30, uber talented comedian with cerebral palsy, Josh Blue. Welcome to The Art of Excellence, a show about people doing extraordinary things in their lives. I'm your host, Glenn Zweig. Thanks for joining me. My guest today is Josh Blue. Josh is a comedian. He has cerebral palsy, which forms the basis for much of his self-deprecating humor. He won first place on NBC's Last Comic Standing in its fourth season. He's appeared in a number of comedy specials on Comedy Central, Showtime, Bravo, and Netflix, and has been featured in several publications, including People Magazine, the New York Times, and NPR, just to name a few. His YouTube videos have been viewed millions of times. He was also a member of the US Paralympic Soccer Team. Josh, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, before we get into it here, I'm not sure everyone listening knows exactly what cerebral palsy is, other than it being some kind of neurological disorder. So I was hoping that you could maybe help us understand it.
Well, the hell if I know what it is. They just told me I had it, and I just went with it. So basically what it is the type of brain injury where the brain receives the message from the body, and then the message is relayed back incorrectly. So basically, cause like fine motor skills are pretty useless on me. This affects my gait, and it's varying degrees, it can come in all shapes, and, it doesn't have to even be seen necessarily. I know lots of people that were on my soccer team that you wouldn't even be able to tell they have palsy.
But it's something that you're born with, right?
Yes, it's born. Well, I think you can get it within 1 year of life. But I was born with it. I was born in Africa, in Cameroon, and they didn't have the proper medical facilities, and there were complications.
Right. And so is it something that you find, and I know there's different kinds, the kind you have, is it somewhat debilitating? Like, does it affect your day-to-day life, or it's no big deal and you just sort of get on with things?
Well, the thing is, this is all that I've ever known, so I don't know what it would be like to do it differently. I'm sure if this all of a sudden just happened to you, it would really jack your day up. But for me, this is just what I have to deal with every day. So I don't think it affects me, just because how would I know if I could do it better, It's always been your normal. Right. Obviously, it does prevent me from doing certain things, but I really don't try to let it, or I don't use it as an excuse. I always say, if I don't accomplish something, it's not because of my palsy. I'm just being a lazy ass.
Well, I mean, obviously, it's something that you essentially wear on your sleeve today. I mean, it's part of your act often. But when you were younger, when you were growing up, were you somewhat self-conscious about it?
Yeah, it took me a long time to get comfortable with it, and sort of, obviously when you're a kid, there's different stages of life. Like when you're a kid, I didn't even know I was disabled until other people told me that I couldn't do things. And then I was like, oh, well, this is your perception of who I am and what I should be able to do. And that mentality actually pushed me harder to be like, well, I don't want to be what you think I am. And then when you get into high school, those angsty years, that was more of like, am I ever going to date a girl because of this? I'm kind of stick out. And, high school is a rough place for being different. It's like there's lots of cliques. But I was actually the guy that was not in one clique. I was pretty much could sit at any lunch table and fit in with the crew. So I just kind of morphed to whatever table I was sitting at, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But I mean, going back to a little bit more of your youth before high school, this attitude of, you know what, I'm not going to be who you think I should be based on how you're going to maybe stereotype me. Is that just something, sort of an inner strength you always had, or were your parents very influential? Were they very supportive in this and telling you just to ignore what people think and live your life? Like, where did that come from?
Well, I mean, I'm the youngest of four. So I think that really is an important part of this. I truly believe if I was the first child with cerebral palsy, I would be a lot less independent and a lot less able to care for myself. Because if you look at being a parent, usually the first kid is the test kid. You know what I mean? You're figuring it out. You're figuring out what's okay, what doesn't work. So if you had a first kid that has cerebral palsy, you would probably be way over more protective. You would be just shelter them more. By the time my parents got to me, they're like, fuck it, he's fine. He'll be all right.
Yeah, he'll be fine. We don't have time anyway.
And the other thing is I do really attribute a lot of my success to the way my parents raised me. They just never treated me differently. Obviously, I had different needs than my other siblings, but it was never a issue. It was like, we take my brother to basketball, my sister to soccer, and we take you to therapy. You know what I mean? Just like, it wasn't a talking point even, it's just what we did. And they treated me like all the other kids. I mean, my older siblings probably wouldn't agree with that, but, they say I got away with murder, and I do,
But both because of birth order and...
Right.
But you never let it in any way hamper your dreams, right? You just sort of lived your life and said, it is what it is, but I'm going to do whatever I want to do in life.
Well, I mean, yeah, I did come to that. I mean, it took some years. I mean, when you're a kid, what do you know? You don't know shit, really. So it took me a while to get into the real world and see other people. I mean, a lot of my kind of turning point, my big turning point was when I was 15. We moved to Senegal, West Africa, for a whole year. And that really, it's such an influential age in anyone's life. But then being a white disabled person in Africa really kind of jarred me into perspective of how, yes, I am different, but I'm very fortunate in what I have. It could be a lot worse. Like, at least I have food and shoes and shelter, and it kind of made the disability pale in comparison to the rest of the world. You know what I mean? Like, at least I'm able to eat regularly,
It's interesting. So it was almost fortuitous that this trip sort of opened your eyes to another part of the world that allowed you to see perspective that maybe you didn't have before.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we were there for a whole year, so it was quite life-changing.
So I know some of your formal comedy didn't start till college and beyond, but as a kid, were you like the class clown? Were you this funny guy, or did all of this not surface till later? Yeah,
I was quick and sharp on it. And so a little bit more about early years. I was actually in special education till the 4th grade. I was in a school that had both special ed and normal classes. So I would see the other kids, and they'd sort of start acclimating us into the other classes, but not till 4th grade that they realized, like, oh shit, this dude's probably smarter than most of the other kids in the whole school. Right. We probably let him go on to the world, So then, going from all disabled kids to being one of the only disabled kids was definitely, I won't say a challenge, but it was like I had to stick out in a different way besides being the disabled kid. I get along with anyone. I can talk to anybody. I can make people comfortable with me without much effort. I'm so comfortable with myself. It's basically how it breaks down. It's like, well, you can't feel bad for me if I'm cracking jokes about myself, I mean, again, when you're a kid, you don't know what you're doing or saying, but looking back, people were always laughing around me, not at me either. It was around me, and I was always the one that had the timing where the teacher would say something and I would just slide the joke in there and the whole class would laugh. And that, I mean, laughter to me is the best way to diffuse pretty much any situation.
So let's fast forward to comedy. I read that you actually majored in comedy in college. Is that true?
Yeah, I went to the Evergreen State College, which is in Olympia, Washington. It's a hippie college. You can create your own courses and majors. And I actually, my senior year, studied stand-up, which is basically me renting Richard Pryor tapes and getting high. But it worked out.
Did you pass the class?
Yeah, aced it. It was cool. I mean, up till then in college, I had been doing a lot of creative writing and some theater stuff. As I was drawn towards the arts. Somewhere along the way in college, I did an open mic. I don't know why I got it in my head that I could do stand-up, but turns out I can. So then I just created the course and found a professor to sign off on it and haven't looked back.
Well, usually when you listen to interviews of well-known comedians, I think I read that Chris Rock is someone that you followed and you admire. I mean, he's one of many where they'll sit there and say, when I started out, I was terrible. And you could hear crickets. And it took just months and then months turning into years and years of trying material and changing how you say it and the delivery and obviously the actual jokes themselves till you finally start to figure out. But it sounds like you sort of got a good response early on.
I did. I really hit the ground running. I didn't know. Let's say this for sure. If I watched any of those videos now, I would vomit. They're so bad. But for the age and the time, I've always had it. I don't know how to put a finger on what it is, but it's a stage presence and it's a likability factor that people are just drawn to listening to what I say. And it's a weird thing to have. And again, when you're young, you don't know what that is. I mean, I'm a seasoned veteran now, and I still can't quite put my finger on it, but I've always had that it factor.
And back when you were in college doing this for the first time, was cerebral palsy part of the routine, or did that come later in life?
You know what? It actually took me a while to come around to it, which is weird because it's the obvious elephant in the room. But I was just a dude on stage telling stories about my crazy life and experiences in Africa and being a camp counselor. And then I kind of realized that I could talk about cerebral palsy and make it in a way that it's not just about palsy, but it's about everybody's disability. You know, everybody can relate to having something in their life that doesn't work. The more raw and real I was with being honest about my life, people just took it in, man. It's people really appreciate when you're just honest and real about life.
Well, you've obviously got this really unique angle, and you're very comfortable on stage, and you've got this natural presence. But you also mentioned you studied comedy. So I'm curious, stylistically, were you trying to model your comedy after any particular comedian, or are there certain ones that were more influential in your act?
I mean, at that point in college, I had surprisingly not even seen that many comics. I remember the first time I saw a stand-up and really took note of it was in high school, and I think it was like, I don't even remember what class, but I remember the teacher, looking back now, he must have been like an alcoholic or something now that I look back, because he'd come in really grumpy a couple days a week, and one day he was just like, I'm just going to play you this Bill Cosby. It was Bill Cosby himself, and I remember sitting there watching this in class and just going, holy shit, that is amazing. And for some reason, I just got in my head, it was like, oh, I could do that. And not too many people watch like a seasoned pro and go, oh, I could do that. And then actually be able to go and do it.
Well, there's a certain amount of confidence that sort of comes with that, right? I mean, you have to feel that you can do it. Otherwise, people sort of see through it.
Right. And I don't know where I got the nerve to think that I could do that. But once I got on stage, initially I was very storyteller, like a Cosby, longer bits. And then I realized that all a joke is a story with all the extra words taken out. You just take it to the bare bones of what you need to get to and move on to the next one.
Well, at one point in college, you had an internship at a zoo in Senegal. And during the last week, you did something that seems pretty insane. So talk about that.
Sure. So I got to go back to Senegal, which I had fallen in love with when I was 15. And I did an internship at the zoo in Dakar. I've always been a big animal lover and a big advocate for animal rights. And so basically I was living on the zoo grounds for 3 months, became a zookeeper. Basically day one, they put me in a tiger cage and said, clean it. It was a crazy adventure. But then I came up with this idea of having them lock me in a cage on display for an entire day. We did it on a Sunday. They locked me in next to a gorilla.
So to clarify, this is your idea. This isn't a punishment or something.
This is my idea. And when I initially thought of it, I wanted to, I won't say protest the zoo, but more of like kind of show you what it's like. Why is it okay to display these animals in a small ass cage, and kind of put some perspective on that sort of the way we view caging beautiful, amazing animals.
You were trying to make a statement, essentially.
Right. But then I realized that I made a completely different statement, and that was that my disability is my cage, and I'm putting it on display for you to see, and going, hey, look at me. You want to see it? Here it is. Basically, I wore some shorts, no shirt, no shoes, and I didn't speak the entire time in the cage. I've been working with chimpanzees and gorillas at the point, so I had learned some primate behaviors and just kind of held true to that and just kind of pretended like I was a real animal. And
I mean, was this for comedic effect? I mean, I'm not sure. Help me understand. I mean, obviously I get the part about you want to make a statement as far as just treatment of animals and that side of it. But in terms of the, hey, let me just, put myself out there and wear nothing but shorts and portray myself as an exhibit. What was behind that?
I'm not sure that I had even thought it all the way through what I was doing. I was just like, hey, let's see what happens. And it was an amazing experiment. I'm telling you, like, in all my days at the zoo, I had never seen so many people at the zoo the day that I was there. Like, and around my cage, there was probably 70, 80 people at all times. Like, this is before, like, cell phones. People must have been leaving the zoo and going to, like, pay phones and be like, you gotta come see this shit.
And what was the reaction? Like, were they just staring?
Well, what's really interesting, too, is that my fellow zookeepers, one guy would stand there and pretend like he was the foremost expert on this particular species. He called me the boo-boo monkey. He was telling me they caught me in the mountains of the Congo. And he was just making this big bullshit story up. And people were like, what the hell? Like, you could just see people like trying to figure out, like, what is this? And the thing is, if you take my cerebral palsy out of context, I don't have a cane or some braces that would let you know that I'm disabled. So you see me moving differently, kind of chimp-like, and not talking and making grunts. And what's really cool, too, is that I speak French pretty fluently, and Wolof, which is the native language of Senegal. So I could hear people talking about me and trying to figure it out. And the whole day was nonstop entertainment, I'm telling you. Also, this is kind of funny side story. Earlier in my stay, I got malaria. That's not the funny part. But I went to a doctor, and he was from somewhere in the Middle East, and nice guy. And I basically, when I was at the doctor, I said, hey, man, why don't you bring your family to the zoo? I'll show you around. Well, the day that he decided to come was when I was in the cage, and I could see him walking up, and I just see the wheels in his head, like, oh no, the malaria has spread to his brain, and he's lost his mind, like. And I was still trying to stay in character, like not talk. And he's like, do you remember me? And I was like, ooh, ooh, ooh. Like just trying to, and then he like ushered his kids and wife away. Like, I don't know what the hell happened to that guy.
So in the moment, those 8 hours, it was just this crazy, goofy experiment, right? And you're having fun with it and all. Afterwards, a week later, a month later, a year later, you look back, besides just the fun factor, did it change you in any way? Did it allow you to see anything that you didn't see before? Like any takeaways?
First of all, when they unlocked the padlock, all the visitors freaked out. They were like, you're letting them out? And people were like running away. People were freaking out. But to be honest with you, I had this idea like, okay, if I die now, I've done something that no one has ever done before, to my knowledge. I've never heard of anyone being a display animal in a zoo. So to me, it was kind of like, wow, I've actually done something in the world that nobody's done before, which is a pretty cool story. And I have that story the rest of my life.
Of course, you could have stood in that cage for about 12 minutes and said the same thing.
Right. Exactly. Looking back on it as a performer, a day in a cage equals a life on stage. Does that make sense? Like once I did that show or performance, the stage is easy. I mean, it's a weird thing because it's like my first real show was that, you know? It wasn't a show that I thought of when I was doing it, but it was a hell of a performance.
That's for sure. Let's talk about NBC's Last Comic Standing for a minute. Did you try out with the hope of just making the cut and getting a little free publicity, or did you actually have the goal of winning the entire thing from day one?
Well, so I actually tried out twice. First year, I stood in, negative 15 below in line for 6 hours in Chicago. Made it in to the audition. You had 2 minutes. I made it like 30 seconds into my thing, and they're like, "Thank you, next." And I was like, and I was pretty let down. You know, I knew that what I was doing at the time, I was winning contests. I was kind of blowing up, and I was just kind of disgruntled and felt like they didn't care about the actual comedy. They were just trying to make a reality show. Then, of course, it comes around next year. I had done a bunch more shows in that year, and instead of standing in line, I actually got a audition, like, "You're on it this time, show up in New York." And I went there to win. I mean, I knew I was going to win. Like, it's a weird thing to say, to have that kind of confidence.
Because these are all really talented. I mean, this is not like Survivor or Amazing Race where there's true amateurs. These are all comedians that have perfected their crafts. They're all traveling comedians. They all do the stand-up circuit. So you're competing with some really, really super talented folks.
All touring comics, yep. And each time that I advanced, like each week that I advanced, I always worried that I would be eliminated. I mean, obviously that's a thing that can happen, but I also knew that it was a reality show and they can spin it any way they want. So I knew I was doing well, but they could edit it to make me look like shit if they wanted to. I just kept week by week, you know, going forward, and, you know, other comics challenge each other. Nobody even challenged me. They were like, "Oh, I'm not messing with that guy." Like in the finals, there was like 5 of us, and I heard another comic like, "We're just all fighting for second place, really."
And what did winning the show do to your career?
Well, I mean, it just blew the doors off anything I was doing before. I was already pretty established touring comic. I had like 35 college gigs the year between the first time I auditioned and the second time. But after that, I mean, I must have done damn near 300 shows a year after that. And I'm still doing 200 a year, and I could do more, but I'm just like at a point where I've been touring for 12 years doing hundreds of shows a year. You know, when you first win something like that, you're like, okay, I don't want to be a flash in the pan. I gotta, you know, work hard. And then, you know, this is 12 years later, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not a flash in the pan, and maybe I can take a little time off and not kill myself.
Well, a lot of your act is focused on your disability, and maybe that's changing now, but certainly for a long time. I realize plenty of comedians use self-deprecating humor. But, you know, it's one thing to talk about your weight or talk about your baldness, but cerebral palsy seems like it's sort of taken it to another level. You know, we can like all relate to someone being overweight, ourselves being overweight, or losing our hair, but it's much tougher to connect, to relate with a disability. So, like, did you know intuitively how to put your audience at ease and make them laugh? Or did you have to go through some sort of awkward phase before you figured out the right way to make it all comedic?
Comedy is a constantly morphing thing. That's what I love about it. You can never learn everything about stand-up because it's constantly changing and the world around you is changing, so you have new perspectives to talk about. As far as the disability side of it is, like I said before, everybody has their own thing that holds them back or society tells them should be held back. And I'm just so comfortable it makes other people comfortable. And if you're not comfortable, that's on you, really. Because if you can't laugh at me laughing at myself, then why are you at a comedy show? The thing is, I'm so comfortable throwing myself under the bus for your entertainment. I'm having so much fun doing it on stage that it just comes across that you just want to smile and have fun with me.
Yeah, and I see that, and I watched you in Last Comic Standing, and I've seen your stuff online, and you definitely do that. I just didn't know if that was something that just was there day one, or it sort of took a while to fit. Because you said when you started out in college, you were not incorporating it into your routine. So at some point you said, why am I not pointing out the elephant in the room, and let me somehow make this part of my act? And I didn't know how natural.
Well, there's definitely a swing to it. At first I didn't talk about it, and then I kind of went almost too far into it and talked, I won't say solely about it, but a lot of it. And now I'm swinging back, and I'm at a point where I still talk about disability stuff. That's because everything I think of comes from the perspective of a disabled person. But it doesn't have to be solely about cerebral palsy.
I want to talk about the darker side of comedy for a minute. And this may not relate to you at all. It seems that comedians and depression often go hand in hand.
Yeah, we're pretty fucked up people.
Why is that? Like, why do so many comedians struggle emotionally?
I don't know that I'm necessarily depressed or that dark. I have a very dark sense of humor and a dark kind of frame of mind. I'm a very happy person for the most part, but I have the brain that is just like, everything I see is like kind of the darker side of things. And I think that's kind of what you need to have to do what we do, because you can see both sides of it at the same time. You have to be very, I don't like to say this because it sounds like I'm bragging or something, but it's like, you have to be pretty intelligent to be a stand-up, right? You have to be able to not just see what's going on, but also see other levels around it. And I think the darkness is always there, and I think that's some of the shit that I say is like Chris Rock shit, where you're like, that should not be funny, and how did you even think of that? I mean, you see darkness, you see Robin Williams, let's say, he's a good example. Had everything going, could make everybody in the world happy except himself, apparently. He never let anybody know that, but because he was masking it with that high energy that he had, but there was something in him that just couldn't deal. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. There's no particular answer. It's just something that I don't know how much comedians are wired a certain way in terms of their biochemistry, and then they get into this and they're already that way to start with, and something about it attracts them because maybe, I don't know, they're already a self-loathing group or something like that, or the fact that it's a very lonely profession, right? You've got 10 minutes or 20 minutes of everybody clapping and all that goes with that, and then a week, a month goes by where you don't have that, and maybe that causes some type of downward spiral for some people.
Most comics I know are very cynical, just expect the worst, and then when something good happens, you're like, well, it just happened to happen. That's not going to do it again, Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a very lonely profession. I mean, tonight I have 2 shows, big energy, big time, but during the day I got shit else to do but sit around in my room and think about horrible shit.
And do an interview.
Yeah, well, this breaks it up. You're keeping me from killing myself today. Thank you.
My pleasure. This may go hand in hand. There also seems to be a lot of drug abuse. Drug overdoses have taken the lives of some of the best comedians, Chris Farley, John Belushi, 2 of my favorites. So are drugs a way to cover up some of this sadness and loneliness, or is it more just about living a crazy, wild, carefree lifestyle, and that just sort of comes par and parcel with it?
Yeah, I think it's hand in hand, where this profession is really conducive to partying. I mean, I don't know too many other jobs where you could go show up high and drunk and they're like, perfect, you're ready. You're ready for work,
It's a requirement almost.
Right. I mean, you get drug tested to make sure that they're in your system. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, your weed level's a little low, you better get in there. I think it's a lot of that, where it's, again, also, too, the other side of it is like, all the free drinks you can handle. I mean, people buy me drinks every night. The club provides my drinks, so it's just too easy to take a beer and then have another one and another one and do it again tomorrow.
Let's talk about the craft of comedy. A lot of people think comedians just sort of jump up on stage and anything they say is an instant hit. They don't understand all the years of hard work creating and trying out material. You've got to go through all this to actually finally get a full set of laughs, right? You got to weed out all the stuff that has no reaction. And so talk about just how does that work? How often are you writing? How often do you try out material that you're not expecting necessarily to get certain reactions just to figure out something new, a new routine?
Sure. So my process is pretty different than a lot of comics. So I don't ever write anything down, like physically write it down. I just have something happen in my life and I go, hey, I'm going to talk about that on stage. And I just have that weird gift, like I said before, where I'm able to say it the right way. And then what happens is then the next day I hopefully say it again, but tweak it on stage. Like the way I practice is live. I mean, I'm constantly tweaking my jokes. So last night I said it this way. Tonight I'm going to say it the way that it worked, and then put in a different word, try a different word. It's like plugging in a comma somewhere or something like that on stage, and you're like, oh, that little pause there made it work so much better, or the different choice of vocabulary can change a whole joke, you know? It's the same thing except for one word, and all of a sudden it's like a hit.
So you've never bombed? You've never gone out there the whole night? You're like, wow, that was terrible.
I've definitely had sets where I come off and I was like, that was awful, and I hated it.
So when that happens, okay, I didn't like that set, didn't get the laughs I wanted, didn't deliver it the way I wanted. Do you sit there and sort of try to analyze? Because like, how do you know if was it the material? Was it the way you delivered it? Was it the audience that just doesn't sort of jive with what you're saying? You know what I mean?
No, I just drink the free beer that they give me and do it again tomorrow. No, I mean, the way to look at it too is if you have a shitty set, that sticks with you until you remedy it, until you have a good set. Have a good set, that feels good for about 8 minutes. The bad ones are the ones that stick with you, and you're like, God, that one person in second row just wouldn't even crack a smile. And you find yourself focusing on these one person that's not enjoying it. And then they come off stage and they come up to you and go, hey, that's the best show I've ever seen. I'm like, why don't you fucking laugh then? Like, it's weird because even when I hate the set, those are most of the times when people are the most complimentary and be like, hey, that was great. Wow, keep it up. And I'm like, well, where were you in the audience? Like, why didn't that work?
I read in some interview you did, you said that you want people to leave your show with a different understanding of your disability. So I guess what preconceived notions do they typically have, and what perspective do you want them to walk away with?
And that really was a big thing that I wanted back in the day. Like I said, I've been doing this for, 15 years. And I still want people to leave there, but I also feel like society's perspective has already changed some since when I started. So, you started seeing more disabled people in movies and TV, and it's more acceptable, and there's a better understanding of what disability is. That being said, there's still so much ignorance about the disabled community. Because here's the thing, is when you see a handicap sign, is that for a blind person? Is that for a deaf person? No, it's for a wheelchair person. That's just one group of people that help. The problem is our society puts us all in that group. So I'm in there with the blind people and the Down syndrome, and they just kind of see us as one block of people, whereas each individual disability has its own unique things we're dealing with.
So you didn't like being sort of lumped in as if disability is some...
But if you put me in the category as someone with Down syndrome, you're going to talk to me like I'm mentally disabled. That's not what my disability is. My body just fucked up, And that's the thing I think that we're getting to, or that I'm helping chisel away at, is that sort of seeing us as individuals as opposed to a big entity.
I also read that you're not crazy about people referring to you as inspirational.
Yeah.
So I'll make sure I don't say it, but help me understand, because to me that's an incredible compliment, but clearly it's not taken that way. So what is it about that bothers you?
Well, there's a couple levels to that. I mean, I do have a joke. I don't know if I can even remember it because it's a couple specials ago, but it's like, oh, you're so inspirational. You think you're being so nice, but what we hear is, man, if I was you, I'd have killed myself. It just kind of takes away from the value of the actual talent that I have. You're seeing this disabled person, you go, oh, it's just so nice that you were able to even get out of bed, It just kind of, I feel like it just takes the value away from the actual talent. I don't know, I've always kind of felt that way. It just seems really condescending. And it's weird, because I don't mind people leaving with a, like I said, different perspective. And I mean, I don't know how many times I've had disabled or non-disabled people go, hey, your courage on stage gave me the courage to go paint or do whatever they wanted to do. But then my thing is like, why did you need my cripple ass to make you do that? Like,
I hear you, but I mean, you had from a very young age an inner strength that allowed you to not let this quote unquote disability be a disability, right? And a lot of people don't have that. And not that they can't, they just don't. And oftentimes it takes someone saying, I don't give a crap what I have. I'm a funny guy. I'm going to be a comedian, or I want to be whatever I want to be. And they need to see that to realize, to have as a mirror to themselves and saying, well, why am I letting it stop me from doing things I can do? And so I guess that's the way I see it. But I hear your side too, which is, like, why shouldn't you be doing all this? And
right.
I get it.
It's a weird line. It really is. It's weird because I want people to go home and make changes in their life from something that I said, but I also, there's just something about the I word. It's like the disability community calls it the I word. Like there's that inspirational porn they have, like little girl. Like, that's what we call it. It's like inspiration porn. It's like a little girl with crutches. Like, if I can do it, you can do it. Like, oh God.
Is that the moonlighting you're doing?
Another thing is like, there's that cynical comedian who's like, I don't think you can do it. Like, I did it, but I don't think you could do what I do. But again, you have something that you can do that I can't do. Again, it's breaking it down to the individual, I think.
At one point, you were a regular guest on a TV show. What show was that?
The Mind of Mencia.
Yeah, and that was a pretty well-received show. Do you have aspirations to get back into television or movies? I know it seems often that that's the holy grail, that comedians do all the stand-up. It's a tough life, even though it's a fun life, and they're looking for that as sort of their big exit, if you will.
Yes, I mean, that's my, I won't say end goal, but I definitely would love to have my own show, and I'd love to be in some more movies. There is a bunch of obstacles with that. I've been to enough auditions for movies to know that if the role doesn't call for somebody with cerebral palsy, then I'm probably not getting the fucking gig. And they're not making very many roles for people with cerebral palsy. And then when they do, they're taken by able-bodied actors, which is even more disheartening. It's like, God, I can do one thing, and then you took it,
But it seems like these new outlets, they're not new anymore, but the Hulus and the Netflixes, the Amazons, that they're a little more experimental. It seems like they don't have to have a whole season. They can try 1 or 2 episodes. Have you thought about just writing your own show that you think would be good and casting yourself, if you will?
Sure. And and I've been working on a show for years. It's interesting to me because I know I have the talent and I have the ideas, but I'm missing something in there that makes that happen. Like, I don't know whether it's the writing or the process or whatever it is. I just haven't found the right team. But like I said, I mean, it is getting more exposure and there's more disability in the world. But I am I think the industry kind of sees me as a loose cannon, almost, where they're like, that guy maybe is a little too much for the public, which I think is what the public needs.
I do too. So when you look back in your life, you obviously started the comedy early on. Call it lucky or just call it talent. You hit it and it started working. And next thing you know, Last Comic Standing, and then that worked out, and et cetera, et cetera. Was there ever a plan B? Like if you just weren't that good, or you just said, gosh, you know what? I can do it, but man, it's a crazy lifestyle. Was there anything else you ever thought about, or it was just 100% all in comedy?
Yeah, I just live on welfare. That's plan B. No, you know what, man? I actually initially wanted to be a park ranger.
Really?
Yeah, I just thought I'd be really good.
You live in Colorado, right?
Yeah.
Do you do a lot of hiking? And
I do. I have 80 acres in the mountains. That's kind of my church that I go to, and it's steep, rugged land with bears and mountain lions, and I just go there to let go and unleash, and so I always picture myself as maybe some sort of park ranger, also a visual artist. Like I do painting and sculpture. It's hard to make a living at that, I know, but I could see myself pretty easily stop touring as much and settle down and do some paintings and some sculpture and sell those.
And would you like for that to happen? Like, is there sort of a timeline in your head of here's how much longer I'd like to do this?
Well, the thing about stand-up is it's kind of very addictive. I get real tired of being on the road, but as soon as I'm home for more than 3 days, I get that itch, and I'm like, God, I just want to be on stage and do this more. So I can't ever see myself stopping doing this. It's one of those things that I just love to do, and I always say this, I'm like, I would do it for free. Don't tell the clubs that, but I would do it because it's so amazing and exhilarating. And again, I feel like you leave my show with a different perspective of disability, and I feel like that's the greater thing that I'm doing. And also, I mean, it's taken me a long time to be confident enough to say this, but I'm really good at this. And there's not that many people that are really good at doing this. I mean, it's a pretty raw craft. I mean, it's you and a microphone. Even a guitarist has a guitar to hide behind. They can play the next song. If you fuck up on a joke, it's solely reliant on your mouth and brain to dig you out of that hole. It's definitely I won't say a dangerous thing, but it's when it goes bad, it can go real bad. Yeah. But I just love it, and I'm addicted. It's like I can see myself doing this as long as I'm relevant, and I plan on being relevant for a while.
Again, I hate using the word lucky, but I'll say you're very fortunate in the sense that I don't think most people in life have something. What's earning their income is not something that they'd use the word passion. It's not something they would use the word addiction. It's something they do because they're almost stuck in a situation where it's just what they've done, and it's a consequence of earlier actions in life they've taken, and here's where they are. And to have something that gives you that much joy and pleasure in life, it's a rare thing, honestly.
It really is, and I'm very fortunate in the fact that I am able to do this. I always say to people, again, maybe you have a shitty job because that's just what you have to do to survive, but whenever I hear people complaining about their position, I'm like, well, find something that you want to do. Like, you could die tomorrow. Do you want to be like, I was in a cubicle my whole life? No. Go find a way to succeed at something that you actually love to do. Because that's my thing, is I'm always kind of expecting to die at any moment. Like, not because of my palsy, just that's how life works, I could walk out of here and somebody drop a hammer out a window and hit me in the head. There's no rhyme or reason to that, the whole death thing. And it's just crouching around the corner waiting for you, So that's what I say. It's like, why are you miserable in this short time that you're here?
I'm with you. The name of this podcast is called The Art of Excellence. Excellence means different things to different people. What does it mean to you? What's your definition of it?
Excellence is being so in tune with the thing that you're doing that no one can touch it, if that makes sense.
Completely makes sense. That's a great definition. Well, I will be at the show tonight.
Awesome.
And I can vouch that you are incredible. This is just such a pleasure to have a chance to sit down with you and hear your story. And thank you for opening up and being a part of the show. I really enjoyed it.
My pleasure, man. It was really fun. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. You can subscribe to the show at iTunes, Stitcher, and theartofexcellence.com. I've got one small favor to ask. If you like the show, please take a minute and leave us a review on iTunes. I would really appreciate that. I'll see you next time.